Well, migration's a particular concern in the US border state of Arizona, which also happens to be one of the battlegrounds likely to decide next month's election. 4 years ago, President Biden won the state by just over 10,000 votes out of more than 3 million cast. 8 years ago, DW's chief international editor Richard Walker went to meet a family of farmers in southern Arizona. He's been back to see them this week to find out what's changed.
Early morning on the Chilton Ranch. This is the far south of Arizona, a wild and beautiful world. It's right on the edge of America, but it's right in the middle of this election. We've been here before. 8 years ago, the rancher Jim Chilton took us down through his land to its very perimeter, the US border with Mexico.
The United States boundary on my ranch is nothing but a 4-strand barbed wire fence.
Jim's ranch had become a route for smuggling drugs into America. For him, Donald Trump had the only answer: building a border wall. Jim and his wife Sue are now celebrated by the Republican Party, even speaking at its convention this year and telling the crowd their problems are far from over.
Every time Jim leaves the ranch house, I have to worry that he won't come back alive.
Now we've come back to the ranch. We want to find out how things have changed in the past 8 years. Did Trump build his wall here? We set out on a long drive down to the border, through 50,000 acres of rugged ranch land.
I'm a 5th-generation Arizona cattleman. My ancestors drove cattle from Texas after the Civil War to Arizona in 1885.
Over the years, this land has been mined for precious metals. It's been grazed by Jim's cattle and used as a route for smuggling drugs. Now it seems the cartels still have the run of these hills and valleys.
So about 10 days ago, I was driving down the road and I spotted about 10 guys running south, running back towards Mexico. They didn't have backpacks. They had camouflage clothes on, and I presume they were drug packers, and they had dropped their drugs and they were headed back south to Mexico to get paid. I went up this road, and for about a half a mile from here, this spot, 2 guys ran across the road. One guy had a rifle, a long gun.
What does go through your mind when you see somebody like that? You think they're armed?
Keep going and don't look back, and avoid a confrontation.
This year, Jim testified to a visiting committee from the US Congress. He submitted recordings from hidden cameras that show camouflaged people carrying backpacks through his land, telltale signs of drug packers. He says his cameras show more than 3,000 crossings since 2021. Some people don't make it all the way through.
I've had perhaps 35 people die on my ranch in the last 30 years, 3 in 2023.
So it seems clear the problems on the Chilton Ranch haven't gone away. And yet, as we get closer to the border, we start to catch glimpses of Donald Trump's wall. We go back to the very same spot we came to 8 years ago. This is what it looked like then. And this is today. Trump's wall slicing its way mile after mile through the hills and rising almost 10 meters high.
At one time, they were making 1,000 feet a day, a mile a week.
But construction stopped as soon as Joe Biden came into office. The Democrats had made ending it a cornerstone of their election campaign, and so the wall ends right here.
They got to there, Biden stopped any construction on the wall. I was outraged. I thought it awful.
While we're talking, Jim spots something on the Mexican side.
See him sitting up there under the tree?
A security guard working in the wall area tells us the people we see are cartel scouts keeping watch. The gap in the wall means it's easy to cross here, not just for drug packers. Jim tells us there was a surge of migrants coming through earlier this year. Volunteer groups have set up camp here to support people coming over, but they don't want to talk to us. Across the full length of the border with Mexico, known illegal crossings have surged to an average of over 2 million per year during the Biden administration. In June, Biden issued an executive order, making it harder to claim asylum for people crossing the border illegally. He acted after Congress failed to pass a bipartisan bill on border security. Democrats blamed Trump for blocking the bill. Jim says Biden's executive order has reduced the number of migrants crossing here. But still, he's not impressed.
I think it's outrageous that Biden made the mistake of stopping the wall and not securing the border in the first place. Then he comes along and says, oh, look, I'm solving the problem. We need to finish the wall. We need to put in the trench with the seismic sensors, electricity, and fiber optic communications. And we need to have the Border Patrol at the wall.
We head to Phoenix, Arizona's capital and a booming tech hub in the desert. It's 3 hours' drive from the ranch, but the border and those who cross it are on many people's minds. Here in the suburbs of this sprawling city, we come to meet Petra Falcon. She runs Promise Arizona, a support group for immigrants.
We navigate public life for immigrants. An immigrant who comes to the United States arrives crossing the border, gets off of a plane, off of a car, and they arrive with nothing. And so they don't know where to go, who to talk to, where they can get some support. And so we become that mediator.
Petra's group is non-partisan, but it's clear it comes from a progressive perspective, focusing on supporting immigrants rather than border security issues. You can see a similar approach in old tweets from Kamala Harris. Over the years, she has railed against the border wall, even calling it a medieval vanity project. But now, views on border security seem to be shifting. Recent polling suggests Democrats are almost as concerned about it as Republicans are. Harris has responded. She says she would revive that bipartisan border security bill if she won the presidency. It includes more funding for the wall. We ask Petra what she thinks of this hardening line among top Democrats.
I just think it's politics, and the country needs workforce. And where is that future workforce going to come from? How do we create a system that works for us in the United States and works for people coming across the border? But people don't want to really deal with it.
We press Petra on whether she accepts that the political climate on border security has simply moved on.
So do you think, fine, just go ahead and finish those last bits of border wall?
I don't know. It's hard for me to think about that. It's hard because I know people who are here who have been here for many years, and I know that why they came. I know how they've suffered. I know some of them are going to be construction workers for the rest of their life.
Trump's impact on the border security debate is clear. Now he's drawn the next battle lines, targeting people who crossed into the US illegally. His platform calls for the largest deportation operation in American history. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has said in an interview that could mean 1 million deportations per year. Petra's group works a lot with undocumented immigrants. people who could be targeted by Trump's plans. They come here for English classes. She says many don't take the threat seriously.
People don't believe it. We have people here coming. Most of our students are undocumented. And they're learning English because they work in a place that they can move up the ladder if they had English. And they'll address their legalization piece later. And maybe they're hoping that the government will figure that out.
So you think people are not too scared about this threat of mass deportation? They think,
Well, number one, they're hoping that Trump loses. And the second thing is, yeah, they don't believe it.
And are you skeptical as well? Do you think it's kind of a...
No, it scares the heck out of me. It does scare the heck out of me.
We head back towards the border and stop in Tucson, the main city in the region. Early voting has begun, so we stop at 2 polling stations to ask what people here think about Trump's deportation idea.
It's inhumane, it's cruel, and obviously it's just insane.
It's necessary. We have Americans who need jobs.
I'm all for it, yeah. He'll take the bad people out. That's key number one. Get rid of the gangs and the bad people. That's the main thing.
He's undocumented in my case. In my opinion, if he's of light-colored skin, he's an immigrant. My family's Native American. My family's also Irish. And both of those people have been abused. So, hands off for Trump.
Oh, you got to start somewhere, and I know a lot of bad guys came in the last couple of years, and I'm sure he'll start with those.
But I hope he does go to the businesses that are hiring people that don't have the documents, right? That's appropriate. But don't go into a home, knock on the door and say, "Here, I'm here to check if you have your papers." You know what I'm saying? That's like totally mind-blowing that could happen. And that would destroy a lot of people.
I support Trump, and so I can't speak for him, but he might have a reason for it.
I agree on it. You know, I know it's going to cost. It's cost already billions of dollars for all these, people from 159 countries coming into our country. Now with a mass deportation, it's going to cost billions of dollars to get them out. And we know they're not going to leave quietly. You know, it's going to be ugly.
Let's return to where we started, and Jim Chilton, the rancher who lives on the Mexican border. We know he wants the wall finished, but what does he think of Trump's plans for large-scale deportations?
I'm not sure that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying he wants to deport people who are criminals. So I don't think he's saying he's going to deport everybody. We need immigrants. I say we need people coming in legally, not illegally.
We pressed Jim on this, raising J.D. Vance's call for 1 million deportations per year.
A lot of good people have come into the United States, and certainly we ought to recognize that. They've come in illegally. And probably a lot of bad people have come in too. We need to deport them. And what are the numbers? I don't think you can deport 10 million, 15 million people. I don't think you can physically do it, and I don't think we really want to.
As we leave Arizona, this thought remains with us, that for all the polarization in border politics, and for all the fury in this election, the debate has shifted in the 8 years since we were last here. And those closest to this issue seem genuinely torn on some of the central questions, down here on the edge of America.
That report from our chief international editor, Richard Walker, who joins us now from Washington. Welcome, Richard. Is migration as big an issue as the candidates are making out?
Well, I think, Phil, if you were with us in Tucson, the biggest city in the kind of border region in southern Arizona, just when we were there the other day, you would come away with that impression. So we went into the city and spoke to a lot of people who were early voting there. So early voting is already underway in Arizona. And we went to 2 different polling stations to make sure that we got kind of a different sort of slice of the community at each one. And certainly immigration, border security was the #1 issue that people came up with. There were a few other issues in there, but certainly the most common issue that was named was that. And it was very much Trump supporters, I think, who were most kind of strident in bringing that up. It's very much a core issue of the Trump campaign, has been, of course, of his political platform ever since he went into politics and won the election 8 years ago.
All right. Well, we'll talk about the Trump approach in a minute. Let's start with the Vice President. Would the approach of a Harris White House to this issue be very different to that of her current boss?
Well, I think what you see from Harris, but also from Joe Biden this year, is that they're beginning to acknowledge that they're playing defense on this issue. That the spike in illegal crossings that has taken place under the Biden presidency, and you see quite a dramatic step up, as we just saw earlier, during the course of his administration, that is putting them on the back foot politically, that this is unpopular with the public. So what you saw earlier this year was this bipartisan border bill that the Biden administration said that it would go along with, which was going to place restrictions on whether people who come across the border illegally can then just claim asylum and then get kind of moved into the system. This legislation would have placed significant restrictions on that and included, in fact, some funding for building more sections of the wall. Now, that got torpedoed in Congress, and the Democrats blamed Donald Trump for that and saying that he didn't want to find a solution, saying that he just wanted to kind of milk this issue during the presidential election campaign. Kamala Harris is saying that she would sign that bill into law if it went through Congress when she was president. But at the same time, you see Harris trying to kind of walk the line and retain some progressive elements to her approach to the border, and talking about the need for a comprehensive immigration reform, the need for finding good paths towards citizenship for people who may have come in illegally earlier on, but are now leading productive lives and contributing to the community. So you see the Democrats trying to strike a new balance, tougher on border security than they used to be, but still more progressive in terms of finding a way into citizenship for people already living here.
And so what about Donald Trump? What's he promising? Would a Trump 2 presidency just pick up from where he left off 4 years ago? We saw that unfinished wall in your report.
Yeah, very much so. I think that is pretty much his promise, that he will finish the wall and that he will also build in some of the logistics and technology around the wall, sensors to check if somebody's trying to cut through it and so forth. So that is part of it, and certainly the rancher we spoke to was all for that. The other part of what Trump is proposing now this time is kind of almost like the new battleground. And this is about what you do about people who have entered the country illegally, should they be deported. And Donald Trump is calling for what we've mentioned it in the report, the largest deportation program in American history. Indeed, Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, has put a number on it, saying that he thinks that it would be reasonable, was the word he used, in an interview, to deport 1 million people per year. And that would go far beyond people with a criminal record. So I think this is now the kind of next battleground, this idea of deporting people who came in illegally. What is meant by that? What is the scope of that? If Trump gets in, this is going to be a major battleground.
And a word about the false claims that Donald Trump has made about the extent and impact of migration. Do his supporters just believe whatever he says, or indeed believe him despite knowing that it's false?
Well, I think it's a very interesting phenomenon, this, Phil, and of course to many observers very troubling that Donald Trump seems to have the ability to make statements that have no factual basis or are severe embellishments and not face consequences for them in the same way that might happen to other politicians. And the volume of that is quite significant. I mean, we saw during his first term, the Washington Post, for instance, they made a tally of over 30,000 statements that they said were either false or misleading that he made during his presidency. But this doesn't seem to have the same impact, it's true, on his supporters. And I think if you talk to supporters, you get the impression that they think that, well, while Trump may exaggerate claims, he may embellish things, sometimes he does even kind of out and out make things up, what they're buying into is an attitude from Donald Trump and a consistency in his overall positions on big questions that goes back to when he first came into politics. And I think they compare that to other politicians, whether it's his rivals within the Republican Party in the primaries earlier this year, or politicians on the other side in the Democratic Party. They look at them and think, well, you know, you may have one or two facts more straight, but you don't have that sort of attitude. And they feel that some of those politicians, I think, you know, the expression I hear, perhaps I can say it on TV, is kind of BS, is that they feel they get more of that from kind of classic politicians, and that Trump, even if the facts aren't straight, speaks some kind of inner truth that really resonates with them more strongly. Of course, for Trump's critics and those on the other side, this is deeply disturbing, because if you have a senior politician, perhaps a president, who is able to make untrue statements with few consequences, what does that mean for the future?
Okay. Thank you for that. Richard, DW's chief international editor is Richard Walker. Thank you so much.
It's less than 2 weeks to go till the U.S. presidential election, and polls are showing the race is still wide open. Americans rank immigration as one of their top concerns after irregular border crossings hit record highs under President Joe Biden. But Democrats accuse former President Donald Trump of making the situation worse by ordering Republicans to block new measures in Congress. After almost 8 years of Trump and Biden, we take a look at what's actually changed.
Trying to cross the U.S. southern border in search of a new life. Millions of migrants and asylum seekers have made this journey in the last 8 years. But there's been a substantial increase since Joe Biden took office back in 2021. While Donald Trump was president, the Border Patrol reported a total of about 1.9 illegal crossings, increasing sharply at the end of his term. But during Biden's time in office, that number spiked before falling again, for a total of about 7 million illegal crossings reported. But in recent months, the number of arrivals has fallen to its lowest level since 2020. That's after Biden signed an executive order in June that lets officials quickly remove people who arrive illegally without processing their asylum claims.
This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage.
Biden had hoped to sign into law more comprehensive immigration measures earlier this year, only for Trump to pressure Republicans in Congress to block the efforts. That's as Trump has made migration one of the central points of his campaign, even threatening to revive a law from the 18th century called the Alien Enemies Act to carry out mass deportations.
Let's dig deeper into this now with DW reporter Amien Essif. Amien, uncontrolled immigration has been a big topic in American politics for a long time. Why is it peaking among voter concerns in this election year?
It's actually a lot more complicated and more interesting question than you might see in the campaigns that are playing out in the United States right now. So on the one hand, the system is overwhelmed, and immigration is more visible than at any time in my lifetime. On the other hand, There were more migrants coming into the U.S. via the southern border in 2005 under George W. Bush than there are now. So this spike that we see is a spike in registered migrants who are reaching the southern border. But the reason is more complicated than that, partly because of the crackdown on people crossing where there is no wall, crossing the Rio Grande, people coming in mostly from Mexico who are undocumented and unobserved as they crossed. Because of the crackdown on that, a lot of hopeful migrants said, let's go and try the asylum process, and have been showing up at the official checkpoints, presenting themselves as asylum seekers and getting into the country that way. Well, at a certain point under Obama, the trend started to spike, and we saw the system becoming more and more overwhelmed by these asylum applications. Fast forward to Donald Trump's presidency, and the trend is still increasing. Donald Trump doesn't talk about that very often, but immigration actually increased under him for a certain amount of time. Presidents like Donald Trump have tried to push back on this, but because of the loopholes in the system, it hasn't really worked. And what you see now is that only about 29% of migrants crossing the southern border are Mexicans. The rest are coming mostly from countries around the world. You have people from West Africa, people from China, from India, mostly from Venezuela too, and other countries in South America. They're coming across the border as asylum seekers, and this has completely overwhelmed the situation. And they also don't have the social networks that Mexicans have in the United States, and are often sleeping on the streets, and that's why it's more visible.
So it is more complex than one might think. But why have both presidencies, the Trump presidency and the Biden presidency, why have those presidencies not been able to get a grip on this issue?
Right, Trump was president 4 years ago. He said he wanted to do mass deportations, use presidential executive orders to crack down on migration. And while that helps somewhat, people tend to find loopholes. So deportations are really difficult to anywhere but Mexico, because you can't just push them across the border. You have to have good relations with countries where these migrants are coming from in order to fly them back there. The second thing is that it needs political action. Any expert on immigration will tell you that we need immigration reform, which we haven't had comprehensively since 1986. The reason that's not happening is because Democrats for a long time did not want to crack down on immigration because it wasn't that unpopular until recently. And the other reason is, even when the Biden administration tried to pass bipartisan immigration reform, which was in the Senate this year, at the beginning of the year, supported by Republican senators, Trump said, kill it. He told Republicans not to support it because he didn't want to let Democrats use his proposed solutions, coming directly from Trump's proposed solutions, to pass bipartisan immigration reform, hand them this victory, and then take away the steam from his election campaign, which is based largely around stirring up fear about immigration.
Trump says he has the solution to the immigration issue. Tell us, is he succeeding in convincing voters that he will get it done?
Well, it has been difficult for him because certain things like forcing asylum seekers to apply for asylum in Mexico before they cross the border, the Biden administration has already implemented. So he has lost some of his proposed solutions and has focused more on rhetoric about how dangerous immigration is. He says the United States is like a country under siege. It's an occupied country. He said that all people coming from the southern border are criminals, which is a lie. And so he's appealed mostly to the emotions, and I think voters are looking for that. Who's the candidate who's the most angry about immigration, regardless of what the actual solutions are, and we're going to vote for them because we believe that they have the solutions.
So what is Kamala Harris doing in response to that? What is she doing to appeal to voters to convince them that she can tackle this problem?
Also a difficult position for her. She's the sitting vice president. She's supported a lot of the immigration, well, let's call it reform, but it's mostly executive orders that Biden has proposed. So she is part of the administration, and if Americans perceive a problem right now, then she's going to be part of that problem. Immigration has actually, since this summer, because of some enforcements that the Biden administration has brought to the southern border, has actually decreased. And she's pointed a little bit to that. She said it's been successful. But obviously, with Trump saying that it's the worst threat to the United States at this point, that we're a country under siege, a lot of his supporters don't buy that. They say that they want somebody who actually has the guts to do the hard stuff, which for a lot of people in the United States is too cruel. But that's his position, and Kamala Harris isn't going to play the game of cruelty.
This discussion very much driven by emotion. Essif, our reporter, thank you very much.